The dust cloud rising from the horse's hooves was the last thing Ethan Sawyer owned, and he knew it as he pushed his mare harder toward the starting line that hot July morning in 1883. Everything he had worked for, scraped together, and saved over 8 years of breaking his back on cattle drives and dangerous trail rides, was now riding on this single race in Custer, South Dakota, and the weight of that reality sat heavier in his chest than any saddle he had ever thrown over a horse's back. Ethan was 24 years old, sun-bronzed and lean from years of outdoor work, with dark hair that fell just past his collar and eyes the color of weathered leather. He had arrived in Custer 3 weeks earlier with his prize mare, a beautiful chestnut named Wildfire, and $50 to his name. The race today was his only shot at changing his fortunes, at becoming the kind of man who could provide for a family, who could look another man in the eye and not feel the sting of being called a drifter or worse. The town of Custer sprawled before him in the morning light, a collection of wooden buildings and dirt streets nestled in the Black Hills. The place had grown up around the gold rush less than a decade before, and though the easy gold was mostly gone, the town still thrived with ranchers, merchants, and dreamers. Ethan had been all three at various points in his life, but today he was putting everything on being right about one thing: that Wildfire was the fastest horse in the territory, and that he could ride her to victory. He guided Wildfire toward the main street where a crowd was already gathering. The race was the highlight of the town's summer celebration, and it seemed like every soul within 50 miles had come to watch, bet, and drink. Ethan scanned the faces, looking for the one person he both hoped and dreaded to see. Natalie Langford stood near the front of the crowd, her auburn hair pinned up beneath a cream-colored hat, her green dress simple but elegant in a way that made every other woman nearby look overdressed. She was 22, and Ethan had fallen for her the moment he saw her step out of her father's general store 3 weeks ago, her arms full of fabric bolts and her laugh bright as mountain water. They had spoken exactly 4 times since then, brief conversations that left him tongue-tied and aching, and he knew with absolute certainty that she was the reason he was about to risk everything. Her father, Samuel Langford, owned half the businesses in Custer and had made it abundantly clear that his daughter would not be courted by saddle tramps, gamblers, or anyone else without prospects. Ethan had heard the words himself 2 days ago when he had gathered the courage to approach Samuel at his store. "My daughter will marry a man of substance," Samuel had said, his gray beard bristling, his eyes hard as flint. "A man who has proven himself. Not some cowboy who rides in with nothing but a horse and hopes." Ethan had left that conversation with his pride wounded, but his determination doubled. He had approached Samuel again yesterday with a proposition that had taken every ounce of courage he possessed. "Mr. Langford," he had said, standing tall despite his worn boots and dusty clothes, "I am entering the race tomorrow. The purse is $500. I am betting everything I own on myself to win. If I take first place, I want your blessing to court your daughter properly. If I lose, I will leave Custer and you will never see me again." Samuel had studied him for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he had nodded slowly. "If you win that race, son, I will consider you a man of your word. You will have my blessing to call on Natalie. But understand this, I am a man of my word too. If you lose, I expect you gone by sundown." Now, as Ethan swung down from Wildfire's saddle near the starting line, he could see Samuel standing beside Natalie, his arms crossed over his broad chest. The older man's face was impassive, but Natalie's eyes found Ethan's across the crowd, and he saw something there that made his heart hammer. Hope, worry, and something else he dared not name. "You are that cowboy everyone is talking about," a voice said beside him. Ethan turned to see a man about his own age with sandy hair and an expensive saddle on his gray stallion, the one who bet everything on this race. "Word travels," Ethan replied, checking Wildfire's girth strap. "I am Carson Webb," the man said, extending a hand. "My father owns the biggest ranch north of here. I have won this race the last 2 years running." Ethan shook his hand, noting the firm grip. "Ethan Sawyer, pleased to meet you." "That your mare?" Carson asked, eyeing Wildfire with the appreciation of someone who knew horses. "She is a beauty." "Where did you get her?" "Raised her from a foal," Ethan said. "Her mother was a Mustang her father brought down from the Montana Territory. She has heart and speed both." Carson nodded slowly. "Well, you will need both today. The course runs 3 miles out of town and 3 miles back. The terrain is rough in places, and there are 7 of us racing. My advice: pace yourself on the way out. Most men burn their horses trying to take an early lead and have nothing left for the return." "I appreciate the counsel," Ethan said, surprised by the man's friendliness. "May the best rider win," Carson said, swinging up into his saddle. "Though I will tell you straight, I intend for that to be me. My own pride is on the line today." Before Ethan could ask what he meant, a gunshot cracked the air. The race marshal, a barrel-chested man with a badge pinned to his vest, was calling the riders to the line. Ethan's hands moved through the familiar motions of checking his stirrups and reins, but his mind was racing faster than any horse could run. Everything depended on the next hour. His future, his chance with Natalie, his very sense of himself as a man who could make something of his life. He led Wildfire to the starting line, taking a position between Carson and a grizzled rider on a paint horse. 6 other men completed the field, each one looking determined and dangerous. The crowd pressed closer, their voices rising in a cacophony of shouts and wagers. Ethan searched for Natalie again and found her still standing with her father. She raised one hand in a small gesture he took as encouragement, and he touched the brim of his hat in response. The marshal raised his pistol to the sky. "Riders ready. The course is marked with red flags. First man back to this line wins $500 and the title. Anyone who cuts the course or interferes with another rider will be disqualified." Ethan gathered his reins, feeling Wildfire's muscles bunch beneath him. The mare sensed the tension, the proximity of the other horses, the energy of the crowd. She danced sideways, eager to run, and Ethan laid a calming hand on her neck. "Easy, girl," he murmured. "We have 3 miles to get there." "Save it." The pistol fired, and the world exploded into motion. 7 horses lunged forward as one, the thunder of their hooves drowning out the crowd's roar. Ethan gave Wildfire her head but kept her collected, letting 3 riders pull ahead while he settled into the middle of the pack. Dust rose in choking clouds, and he squinted against it, trusting Wildfire's sure feet as they pounded down the main street and out onto the trail beyond town. The course followed an old freight road that wound through stands of ponderosa pine and across open meadows dotted with sage. The lead riders set a punishing pace, and Ethan watched one man on a bay gelding start to fade after less than a mile. Carson was running third, his gray stallion moving with the smooth efficiency of a well-trained racehorse. Ethan held his position, feeling Wildfire's rhythm beneath him, sensing that she had more to give when he asked for it. The trail climbed into rougher country, rock outcroppings appearing on either side. The lead rider, a man in a black hat, took a turn too fast and his horse stumbled. The man kept his seat, but the delay allowed Carson to move into the lead with another rider, a stocky man on a sorrel, right behind him. Ethan urged Wildfire forward, passing the rider on the paint horse who was already laboring. By the time they reached the halfway point, marked by a tall red flag snapping in the wind, the field had stretched out considerably. Carson was still in front, the sorrel close behind, and Ethan had moved into third place. Two other riders were within striking distance behind him, and the rest had fallen back out of contention. Ethan leaned forward as Wildfire rounded the flag, her hooves kicking up pine needles and dust. "Now, girl," he said, giving her more rein. "Now we run." Wildfire responded like she had been waiting for the command her entire life. She lengthened her stride, her breathing deep and steady, and the distance between Ethan and the sorrel began to close. The terrain on the return was slightly downhill, which helped, but it also made the footing trickier. Ethan had to trust Wildfire completely, letting her pick her path while he focused on balance and timing. They thundered through a stand of pine, the trees a blur on either side, and suddenly, Ethan was alongside the sorrel. The other rider glanced over, his face red with effort, and applied his spurs. His horse surged forward, but Ethan could see the animal was already giving everything it had. Wildfire swept past with something still held in reserve, and now there was only Carson ahead. The gray stallion was perhaps 50 yards in front, and Carson was riding with skill and confidence. Ethan had no doubt the man had won his previous races through a combination of a good horse and excellent horsemanship. But Wildfire was something special, and Ethan knew it in his bones. He had spent 2 years training her, learning her moods and capabilities, and he had never asked her for everything she had. Today he would have to. "Come on, Wildfire," he urged, leaning low over her neck. "This is what we came for." The mare's ears flicked back, listening to his voice, and then forward again as she locked onto the gray stallion ahead. Ethan felt her dig deeper, finding another gear, and the gap began to close. 40 yards. 30. Carson glanced back and saw him coming. The other man's face set with determination, and he asked his stallion for more speed. The gray responded gamely, but Ethan could see the animal was near its limit. Carson's riding was still flawless, but the horse beneath him had given most of what it had during the aggressive early pace. Wildfire, conserved through the first half of the race, was just hitting her stride, 20 yards. 15. The town was coming into view ahead, the buildings shimmering in the afternoon heat. The crowd's roar reached them even at this distance, a wall of sound that grew louder with every stride. Ethan could make out individual faces now, could see the mass of people lining both sides of the street that served as the finish line. 10 yards. Carson glanced back again, and this time Ethan saw resignation flicker across his features. The man knew he was beaten. But he did not give up, riding hard all the way as Wildfire drew level and then began to pull ahead. Ethan caught a glimpse of Carson's face as they passed him, and saw respect there along with disappointment. 5 yards. Ethan and Wildfire were a full length ahead now, the mare's hooves eating up the distance to the finish line. Ethan's heart was pounding so hard he could barely breathe, but it was not from the physical exertion. Everything he had dared to hope for was 50 feet away, then 30, then 10. They flashed across the finish line, and the crowd exploded. Ethan sat back in the saddle, slowing Wildfire gradually, letting her cool down from the tremendous effort. She was breathing hard but not labored, her coat dark with sweat but her step still proud. Carson crossed the line a moment later, followed by the man on the sorrel a good 30 seconds behind. People were rushing forward, surrounding Ethan and Wildfire. Hands reached up to slap his leg, voices shouted congratulations, and someone was already pressing a tin cup of water into his hands. Ethan drank gratefully, his throat raw from the dust and exertion, and then poured the rest over his head. He was laughing, he realized, laughing with relief and joy and disbelief that he had actually done it. "Hell of a ride," Carson said, appearing beside him on foot, leading his gray stallion. The other man was grinning despite his loss. "That mare of yours is something special. I have never been beaten that cleanly in my life." "Your stallion is a fine animal," Ethan replied, meaning it. "You rode a good race." "Not good enough," Carson said, but there was no bitterness in his voice. "I heard about your wager, about why you needed to win. I hope she is worth it." Ethan followed Carson's gaze and saw Natalie pushing through the crowd toward him. Samuel was right behind her, his expression less stern than before but still guarded. Ethan swung down from Wildfire's saddle, suddenly acutely aware of how he must look, covered in dust, sweating, his clothes worn and patched. But Natalie's eyes were shining as she reached him, and she did not seem to care about any of that. "You won," she said, and there was wonder in her voice. "I did," Ethan replied, unable to stop grinning. "I did not lose her." "Lose who?" Natalie asked, confusion crossing her face. "Wildfire," Ethan said, then realized how that sounded. "I bet her on the race. She was the only thing of value I owned. If I lost, I would have had to sell her to pay my debts. I would have had nothing left." Natalie's hand went to her mouth. "You bet your horse." "Everything, everything," Ethan confirmed. He looked past her to Samuel, who had stopped a few feet away. "I told you I was a man of my word, Mr. Langford. I won your race." Samuel stepped forward, his eyes moving from Ethan to Wildfire and back again. The older man reached out and ran a hand down the mare's sweaty neck, examining her with the eye of someone who knew horseflesh. After a long moment, he nodded slowly. "You won fairly," Samuel said, "and that is a hell of a horse. But more than that, you showed more guts than sense, betting everything on yourself. A man who believes in himself that much is worth something." He extended his hand. "You have my blessing to court my daughter, Ethan Sawyer. Make good use of it." Ethan shook the offered hand, feeling like his chest might explode. "Thank you, sir. I will. I promise you that." "See that you do," Samuel said gruffly. Then his expression softened slightly. "Come by the house tomorrow evening for supper. 6 o'clock. Do not be late, and try to look a little less like you have been dragged behind that horse." With that, Samuel turned and walked back through the crowd, leaving Ethan alone with Natalie. Well, as alone as two people could be surrounded by half the population of Custer. Ethan was suddenly aware of all the eyes on them, the whispered conversations and knowing smiles. Natalie seemed to realize it at the same moment, and a flush crept up her cheeks. "I should go," she said, but she did not move. "Father will be expecting me." "Natalie," Ethan said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "I need you to know something. I did not just win this race for your father's blessing. I won it because from the moment I saw you, I knew you were worth risking everything for. I know we have barely spoken, and you hardly know me, but I am asking you to give me the chance to change that." Her green eyes searched his face for a long moment. "I watched you ride today," she said quietly. "I watched you risk everything on a belief that you could win. That takes courage. It also takes a certain amount of foolishness." Her lips curved into a small smile. "I think I would like to get to know a man who has both those qualities." "Tomorrow at 6, Ethan said. "I will be there. And I will try not to look like I have been dragged behind a horse." Natalie laughed, the sound bright and genuine, and then she turned and followed her father through the crowd. Ethan watched her go, feeling like he was floating. Around him, people were still celebrating, and the race marshal was pushing through to present the purse and declare him the official winner. But all Ethan could think about was Natalie's smile and the knowledge that he had just cleared the first hurdle toward building the life he wanted. Carson appeared at his elbow again. "Congratulations, that was quite a declaration." "You heard that?" Ethan asked, embarrassed. "Half the town heard it," Carson said cheerfully. "But do not worry, it will make you a legend, the cowboy who bet everything on a single race and won his girl's hand. They will be telling that story in Custer for years." "I have not won anything yet except her father's permission to court her," Ethan pointed out. "Details." Carson waved a hand dismissively. "But you will need more than charm and a fast horse to keep Samuel Langford's approval. He is a tough man and a shrewd businessman. He will expect you to prove you can provide for his daughter." "The race purse will help," Ethan said. $500 was more money than he had ever had at one time. It was enough to start something real, to put down roots. "It will help for a while," Carson agreed. "But then what? Do you have plans beyond this race?" Ethan hesitated. The truth was, he had not thought much past winning. He had been so focused on the race and on winning Samuel's blessing that he had not considered what came after. "I am a good hand with horses," he said finally. "I figured I would find work on one of the ranches around here, maybe save enough to start my own small place eventually." Carson studied him for a moment, then seemed to come to a decision. "My father is always looking for good men who know horses. We run cattle, but we also breed and train working stock. If you are interested, come by the Webb Ranch tomorrow morning. It is about 5 miles north of town. Ask anyone for directions. I will put in a word for you." "You would do that?" Ethan asked, surprised. "I just beat you in the race." "You beat me fair and square," Carson said. "And like I told you before, may the best rider win. Today you were the best rider. That does not mean we cannot be friends or that I cannot appreciate your skill with horses. Besides," he added with a grin, "you are going to need all the help you can get dealing with Samuel Langford as a future father-in-law. Consider it my contribution to your suffering." Ethan laughed and shook Carson's hand. "Thank you, truly. I will take you up on that offer." The race marshal finally reached them, carrying a leather pouch that clinked with the sound of coins. "Ethan Sawyer, by the power vested in me as marshal and chief arbiter of this race, I declare you the winner. Here is your purse, $500 in silver and gold. Congratulations, son." That was one hell of a ride. Ethan took the pouch, the weight of it solid and real in his hands. $500. More than he had earned in the last 2 years combined. He thought of all the things he could do with it, the security it represented. But more than that, he thought of what it meant. Proof that he was more than just a drifter, that he could back up his words with action. The crowd eventually dispersed, people heading to the saloons and restaurants to continue celebrating. Ethan led Wildfire to the livery stable, where he spent the next hour carefully cooling her down, rubbing her legs, and making sure she had fresh water and good hay. She had given him everything today, and he would not neglect her now. "You beautiful, wonderful, amazing creature," he murmured, brushing her coat until it gleamed. "You saved my life today. You know that. You gave me a future." Wildfire nickered softly and nuzzled his shoulder, looking for the piece of apple he usually kept in his pocket. He laughed and produced it, letting her lip it from his palm. "Tomorrow we will go see about a job," he told her. "A real job with regular pay, maybe even a place to live that is not a stable stall. What do you think about that?" The mare munched her apple contentedly, and Ethan took that as approval. He made sure she was comfortable, and then headed to the small boarding house where he had been staying. His room was barely bigger than a closet, with a narrow bed and a washstand. But after months of sleeping under the stars on cattle drives, it felt luxurious. He stripped off his dusty clothes and washed as best he could with the pitcher of water, then fell into bed, utterly exhausted. Sleep came quickly, but his dreams were full of auburn hair and green eyes, of a future that suddenly seemed possible. The next morning, Ethan woke before dawn out of habit. He dressed in his cleanest shirt and pants, though they were still worn and faded, and headed to the livery to check on Wildfire. The mare was moving well, showing no signs of stiffness from the race, which relieved him immensely. He saddled her and rode out of town as the sun was breaking over the Black Hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. The Webb Ranch was easy to find. It sprawled across a broad valley with a substantial main house, several barns, and extensive corrals. Ethan could see dozens of horses grazing in pastures, and the whole operation had an air of prosperity and good management. He rode up to the main house and was met by a ranch hand who directed him to the largest barn, where Carson was already at work. "You are an early riser," Carson called out when he saw Ethan approaching. "That is a good sign. My father values punctuality and work ethic above almost everything else." "I have been getting up before dawn since I was 12 years old," Ethan replied, swinging down from Wildfire's saddle. "It is a hard habit to break." "Come on," Carson said. "I will introduce you to my father. Fair warning, he is even tougher than Samuel Langford, and that is saying something." Douglas Webb was a barrel-chested man in his 50s with iron-gray hair and hands like leather from decades of ranch work. He was examining a yearling colt's legs when Carson and Ethan approached, and he did not look up until he had finished his inspection. "Father, this is Ethan Sawyer," Carson said. "The man I told you about, the one who won yesterday's race." Douglas straightened and studied Ethan with eyes that seemed to see everything. "Heard about your ride," he said finally. "Heard about your bet, too. That was either very brave or very stupid." "A little of both, sir," Ethan admitted. "But it worked out." "This time," Douglas said. "But a man who gambles everything on a single throw of the dice usually ends up broke. I need hands who are reliable and steady, not gamblers." "With respect, sir, I am not a gambler," Ethan said, meeting the older man's gaze. "I spent 2 years training that mare, learning her capabilities, preparing for that race. It was not a gamble. It was a calculated risk based on knowledge and preparation. There is a difference." Douglas's expression did not change, but Ethan thought he saw a flicker of approval in the man's eyes. "Carson tells me you are good with horses. What is your experience?" "I have been working with horses since I could walk," Ethan said. "My father was a horse trader before he died. I learned from him. I have worked cattle drives, broken green horses, done some training. I raised Wildfire from a foal, and you saw what she can do." "I saw a fast horse with a good rider," Douglas said. "That tells me you know how to ride, but it does not tell me if you can train a difficult horse or diagnose lameness or recognize when an animal needs medical attention. Can you do those things?" "Yes, sir," Ethan said simply. "I can do all of those things, and I am willing to prove it." Douglas considered this, then nodded toward the corrals. "See that paint gelding in the far pen? He was green, broke by the previous owner but never finished proper. He is spooky, balky, and has a tendency to rear when he does not want to do something. I need him turned into a reliable working horse. If you can make progress with him, we will talk about a permanent position." "How much time do I have?" Ethan asked. "Take all the time you need," Douglas said. "But understand that time is money on a ranch. The faster you can produce results, the more valuable you are to me." "I understand," Ethan said. "Can I start today?" "Right now if you want," Douglas said. "Carson will show you what we have for tack and tools. We will provide meals and a place in the bunkhouse for as long as you are working on this. After that, we will see." It was not a job offer, not exactly, but it was a chance, and that was all Ethan needed. He spent the rest of the day working with the paint gelding, taking his time to assess the horse's temperament and issues. The animal was indeed spooky, shying at shadows and quick movements, but Ethan could tell there was no real meanness in him. He had just been pushed too fast by someone who did not take the time to build trust. Ethan worked slowly and patiently, doing simple groundwork, getting the gelding used to his presence and touch. He did not try to ride the horse that first day, focusing instead on establishing a foundation of calm and trust. By the time the sun was setting, the gelding was following him around the corral without a lead rope, and Ethan felt like he had made a good start. Carson found him as he was putting away the training equipment. "You did not even try to ride him today." "No point," Ethan said. "If I pushed him before he was ready, I would just reinforce his bad habits. Better to take it slow and do it right." "My father will appreciate that," Carson said. "Most of the hands we get are in a hurry to prove themselves. They usually end up getting hurt or hurting the horse." "Your patience is a good sign." He paused, then added, "You are supposed to be at the Langford house for supper tonight, are you not?" Ethan glanced at the sky and realized with a start that it was already past 5 o'clock. "I need to get cleaned up. Where is the bunkhouse?" "This way," Carson said, leading him to a long, low building near the main barn. "There is a washroom at the end with a mirror and such. You have time, but do not dawdle. Samuel Langford does not tolerate tardiness." Ethan washed quickly, scrubbing the day's dust and sweat from his skin and changing into his one good shirt. It was not fancy, but it was clean and relatively unwrinkled. He combed his hair, studying his reflection in the cracked mirror, and wondered what Natalie would see when she looked at him tonight. A cowboy with a fast horse and nothing else, or a man trying to build something real. He rode Wildfire back into Custer, arriving at the Langford house with 5 minutes to spare. It was a handsome 2-story home on the edge of town, with a wraparound porch and flower boxes in the windows. Ethan tied Wildfire to the hitching post and climbed the front steps, his heart hammering. He had faced down stampeding cattle, wild mustangs, and yesterday's race with less nervousness than he felt right now. He knocked on the door, and it opened almost immediately. Natalie stood there in a blue dress that brought out the green in her eyes, her hair loose around her shoulders. For a moment, Ethan forgot every word he had ever known. "Hello," Natalie said, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "You are right on time, and you look much better than you did yesterday." "I did my best not to look like I had been dragged behind a horse," Ethan managed to say. Natalie laughed, that bright sound he was already coming to treasure, and stepped aside. "Come in. Father is in the dining room. I should warn you, he has been fussing over this meal all day. He wants to make a good impression, though he would never admit it." The inside of the house was comfortable without being ostentatious, with solid furniture and family photographs on the walls. Ethan followed Natalie through a parlor and into a dining room where Samuel was setting serving dishes on a table covered with a white cloth. The older man looked up as they entered. "Mr. Sawyer," Samuel said formally, "thank you for joining us. Please sit." The meal was simple but well prepared. Roasted chicken, potatoes, fresh bread, and vegetables from what Ethan assumed was a garden out back. Samuel said grace, and then they began to eat. For a few minutes, the only sound was the clink of silverware against plates. Ethan was acutely aware of his table manners, trying to remember everything his mother had taught him before she died. "So," Samuel said finally, fixing Ethan with his sharp gaze, "you won $500 yesterday. What do you plan to do with it?" "I am going to save most of it," Ethan said. "I started working at the Webb Ranch today. If that turns into a permanent position, the race money will give me a cushion and maybe let me start saving toward my own place eventually." The Webb Ranch is a good operation, Samuel said, nodding slowly. Douglas runs a tight ship. If he hired you, it means he sees potential. He has not exactly hired me yet, Ethan admitted. He gave me a test. I am working with a difficult horse. If I can make progress, we will talk about a permanent position. And if you cannot, Samuel asked. Then I will find something else, Ethan said. I am not afraid of hard work and I am good with horses. Someone will hire me. Natalie had been quiet during this exchange, but now she spoke up. Father, you are interrogating him like a suspect. This is supposed to be a supper, not a trial. I am simply trying to understand what kind of man wants to court my daughter, Samuel said, but his tone softened slightly. That is a father's job. Tell me about your family, Ethan, Natalie said, clearly trying to steer the conversation to safer ground. Where are you from originally? Kansas, Ethan said. A town called Abilene. My father was a horse trader like I told Mr. Webb today. My mother took in sewing. They both died when I was 16, cholera epidemic. After that, I drifted for a while working where I could. I learned young that if you are good with horses, you can always find work. That must have been hard, Natalie said softly. Losing both your parents so young. It was, Ethan admitted. But it also taught me to rely on myself, to work hard and not expect handouts. Maybe that is why I was willing to bet everything on that race. When you have lost everything once, the idea of risking what you have becomes less frightening. Samuel studied him across the table. That is a hard truth, son, but it is the kind of truth that builds character. I lost my wife, Natalie's mother, 6 years ago. I know what it is to rebuild a life after loss. I am sorry for your loss, Ethan said sincerely. We manage, Samuel said gruffly. Natalie keeps the household running and I keep the businesses going. But it is not the same as having a full family. Which is why, he continued, looking at his daughter, I want to see Natalie settled with a good man who can provide for her and give her the life she deserves. Father, Natalie said, a warning note in her voice. I am just being honest, Samuel said. Mr. Sawyer needs to understand what is expected of him. My daughter is not some dance hall girl looking for a cowboy with a fast horse and a charming smile. She is a lady who deserves to be treated as such. I would never think otherwise, sir, Ethan said. And I promise you, my intentions are completely honorable. I want to court Natalie properly, get to know her and give her the chance to know me. If things work out between us, I will work every day of my life to provide for her and make her happy. Samuel leaned back in his chair, considering. Fair enough. You have my blessing to call on Natalie as I promised, but understand that blessing can be revoked if I see behavior I do not approve of. Are we clear? Crystal clear, sir, Ethan said. The rest of the meal passed more pleasantly, with the conversation turning to lighter topics. Natalie told stories about growing up in Custer, about the town's early days during the gold rush, and about the various characters who had passed through over the years. She was funny and intelligent, with a sharp wit that kept Ethan constantly engaged. Samuel even unbent enough to tell a few stories of his own, and by the time they had finished eating, Ethan felt like he was beginning to understand the family he was hoping to become a part of. After supper, Samuel excused himself to his study, giving Ethan and Natalie a moment alone on the front porch. The night was cool and clear, with stars scattered across the sky like spilled diamonds. Ethan stood beside Natalie at the porch rail, close enough to catch the faint scent of lavender from her hair, but careful not to stand too close. He did not want to give Samuel any reason to revoke his blessing. Thank you for supper, Ethan said, and for convincing your father to give me a chance. I did not have to convince him of anything, Natalie said. He gave you that chance all on his own by agreeing to your wager. I think he respects your boldness, even if he would never say so." "What about you?" Ethan asked. "Do you respect it, or do you think I am just a reckless fool?" Natalie turned to face him, her expression serious in the moonlight. "I think you are a man who knows what he wants and is willing to fight for it. That is rare, Ethan. Most men I have met are content to drift through life taking what comes easily and never reaching for anything more. You reached for something difficult and succeeded. That tells me a lot about your character." "I reached for it because of you," Ethan said quietly. "I want you to know that. I came to Custer with nothing but my horse and the hope of making something of myself. Then I saw you, and suddenly I had a reason to do more than just survive. You gave me something to work toward." "That is a lot of weight to put on someone you barely know," Natalie said, but she was smiling. "Then let me get to know you," Ethan said. "Really know you. Your hopes, your dreams, what makes you laugh, what keeps you up at night. I want to know everything." "That could take a while," Natalie teased. "I am very complicated." "I am not going anywhere," Ethan replied. "I have a job to do at the Webb Ranch, and I have your father's blessing to court you. I intend to take my time and do both things right." Natalie looked at him for a long moment, and Ethan could see her weighing his words, deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she nodded. "All right, Ethan Sawyer, you have my permission to court me properly. But I am warning you now. I am not some delicate flower who needs a man to take care of her. I have been running this household for 6 years. I keep my father's business accounts, manage his inventory, and negotiate with suppliers. I want a partner, not a protector. Can you accept that?" "I would not want it any other way," Ethan said honestly. "Strong women do not scare me. They inspire me." Natalie's smile widened, and for a moment Ethan thought she might take his hand. But the door opened behind them and Samuel appeared. "Time for Mr. Sawyer to be heading back to the ranch," Samuel said firmly. "Natalie needs her rest, and I am sure you have an early morning ahead of you, son." "Yes, sir," Ethan said. He touched the brim of his hat to Natalie. "Thank you again for a wonderful evening." "Come back soon," Natalie said. "Maybe next Sunday for church and lunch after." "I would like that very much," Ethan replied. He mounted Wildfire and rode back to the Webb Ranch under the stars, his heart lighter than it had been in years. The bunkhouse was quiet when he arrived, most of the other hands already asleep. Ethan stretched out on his assigned bunk, but sleep was slow to come. His mind kept replaying the evening, Natalie's laughter, her intelligence, the way she had looked at him in the moonlight. He had won the race, but he was beginning to realize that winning Natalie's heart would be an even greater challenge. And unlike the race, there would be no finish line, no clear moment of victory. This was going to be a long-term commitment, a daily choice to show up and prove himself worthy of her trust and affection. He fell asleep with that thought in his mind and woke to the sound of the ranch coming to life around him. The bunkhouse was emptying as hands headed out to their various tasks, and Ethan quickly dressed and joined them. After a quick breakfast in the cookhouse, he made his way to the corral where the paint gelding was waiting. The horse nickered when he saw Ethan approaching, which was a good sign. Ethan spent the morning continuing the groundwork he had started yesterday, gradually introducing new elements, asking the horse to move away from pressure, to back up on command, to stand quietly while being touched all over. The gelding was responding well, his early nervousness giving way to curiosity and cooperation. By midday, Ethan felt confident enough to introduce a saddle. He let the horse examine it, sniff it, and get used to its presence before gently laying it across the animal's back. The gelding tensed but did not panic, and after a few minutes of standing quietly, he relaxed. Ethan removed the saddle and repeated the process several times, building the horse's confidence and trust. Carson stopped by to watch for a while, leaning against the corral fence. "You have a good touch with him. He is calmer than I have ever seen him." "He is not a bad horse," Ethan said. "Just scared. Someone pushed him too fast and he learned that humans are unpredictable and dangerous. I am just teaching him that not all humans are like that." "How long before you think you can ride him?" Carson asked. "A few more days, maybe," Ethan said. "I want to make sure the foundation is solid before I try. If I push too fast, I will undo all the progress I have made." "Father appreciates thoroughness," Carson said. "Take the time you need. We have plenty of other work around here." Over the next several days, Ethan settled into a routine. He worked with the paint gelding every morning, gradually introducing him to the saddle and bridle, getting him used to weight and pressure. In the afternoons, he helped with other ranch work, mending fences, moving cattle, working with the other horses in training. The work was hard but satisfying, and he felt himself becoming part of the ranch's rhythm. On Sunday, he rode into Custer for church and lunch with Natalie and Samuel. The church was a simple white building with wooden pews and stained glass windows that cast colored light across the congregation. Ethan sat with the Langfords, acutely aware of the attention they were attracting. Everyone in town seemed to know about the race and his wager, and the gossip about him courting Samuel Langford's daughter was apparently the most interesting thing to happen in Custer in months. After the service, they returned to the Langford house for lunch. This time, Samuel left Ethan and Natalie alone in the parlor after they had eaten, and Ethan took the opportunity to learn more about her. "Tell me about keeping your father's business accounts," he said. "That is not a skill most women learn." "My mother taught me," Natalie said. "She was the one who actually ran the business side of things when she was alive. Father is good at buying and selling, at knowing what products people need, but he has no head for figures. Mother did all the bookkeeping, and she taught me from the time I could write. After she died, I just stepped into her role. It was either that or hire someone, and Father could not bear to have a stranger poking into his accounts." "So you run the store's finances?" Ethan asked, impressed. "And the investment properties Father owns and the freight contracts," Natalie said. "Father makes the decisions, but I make sure the numbers add up and that we are not being cheated by suppliers or customers. It gives me something useful to do, and I like the challenge of it." "What would you do if you could do anything?" Ethan asked. "If you were not keeping accounts for your father," Natalie considered the question seriously. "I think I would want to own my own business, maybe a dress shop or a restaurant, something that is entirely mine that I build from nothing." "Is that strange?" "Not at all," Ethan said. "I feel the same way about horses. I would love to have my own ranch someday, breeding and training horses. Not a huge operation like the Webbs have, but something mine, where I make the decisions and reap the rewards of my own work." "We are similar that way," Natalie said thoughtfully. "Both wanting to build something of our own. That is rare, I think. Maybe that is why I felt drawn to you from the moment I saw you," Ethan said. "Some part of me recognized a kindred spirit." They talked for hours that afternoon, only breaking apart when Samuel came in to announce that it was getting late and Ethan should probably head back to the ranch. Ethan left reluctantly, already looking forward to the next time he could see Natalie. The following days fell into a pattern. Ethan worked with the paint gelding and the other ranch horses, proving his value to Douglas Webb. On Sunday, he would ride to Custer for church and spend the afternoon with Natalie. Sometimes Samuel would join them, sometimes he would give them privacy. Slowly, carefully, Ethan and Natalie built a foundation of friendship and trust that was deeper than mere attraction. 3 weeks after the race, Ethan finally felt ready to ride the paint gelding. He chose a quiet morning when the other hands were occupied elsewhere, not wanting an audience in case things went wrong. Carson came to watch, standing outside the corral in case assistance was needed. Ethan took his time saddling the gelding, talking to him quietly, keeping everything calm and methodical. The horse stood patiently, a far cry from the nervous, spooky animal he had been when Ethan started working with him. When the saddle was secure and the bridle in place, Ethan spent several minutes just standing beside the horse, one hand on the saddle, applying pressure without actually mounting. Finally, he put his foot in the stirrup and swung up smoothly, settling into the saddle with slow, deliberate movements. The gelding's ears flicked back and forward, but he did not move. Ethan sat quietly for a long moment, letting the horse get used to his weight, then asked for a walk with gentle pressure from his legs. The gelding took a tentative step, then another. Ethan kept his hands light on the reins, his body relaxed and balanced. They walked around the corral once, twice, 3 times. The horse was calm, responsive, exactly as Ethan had hoped. He asked for a trot, and the gelding moved smoothly into the faster gait. By the time they had circled the corral several more times at various speeds, Ethan was grinning. "That is impressive," Carson called out. "He looks like a completely different horse." "He just needed someone to take the time with him," Ethan said, bringing the gelding to a halt and swinging down. He ran a hand down the horse's neck, feeling the steady heartbeat, the calm breathing. "You did good, boy. Real good." Douglas Webb appeared at the corral fence, having apparently heard that Ethan was planning to ride the gelding today. The ranch owner watched as Ethan put the horse through several more exercises, demonstrating the animal's newfound confidence and obedience. When Ethan finally dismounted and began unsaddling the gelding, Douglas opened the corral gate and stepped inside. "That was good work," Douglas said simply. "Real good work. That horse is worth 3 times what we paid for him now that he is properly trained." "Thank you, sir," Ethan said. "I have seen enough," Douglas continued. "If you are interested, I would like to offer you a permanent position here at the ranch, $40 a month plus room and board. Your main job would be working with the training horses, but you would help out with general ranch work as needed." Does that sound acceptable? $40 a month was a good wage, more than Ethan had made on most of his previous jobs. Combined with the money he had won in the race, it would allow him to save steadily, to build toward the future he was envisioning. "Yes, sir, it is more than acceptable," Ethan said, unable to keep the satisfaction out of his voice. "I would be honored to work for you permanently." "Good," Douglas said. "Consider yourself hired. Report to Carson tomorrow morning. He will get you set up with your permanent bunk and assign you your regular duties." He paused, then added, "I heard you are courting Samuel Langford's daughter." "Yes, sir, I am," Ethan said, wondering if this was going to be a problem. "Samuel is a friend of mine," Douglas said. "He mentioned your arrangement. The race, the wager, all of it. I will tell you what I told him. A man who is that committed to winning a woman's hand is usually worth the gamble. But now you have won the race and you have a steady job. The real test is what you do next. Do not let Samuel down. And more importantly, do not let that girl down. She deserves a man who will work as hard at the relationship as you did to win that race." "I understand, sir," Ethan said. "And I will not let them down. You have my word on that." Douglas nodded once and walked away. Carson approached, grinning broadly. "Congratulations on the permanent position. You have earned it. Father does not give compliments lightly, and he definitely does not hire people unless he is sure they are worth it." "Thank you for putting in a word for me," Ethan said sincerely. "I know that helped. You proved yourself," Carson said. "I just opened the door. You are the one who walked through it." He clapped Ethan on the shoulder. Come on, let us go tell the other hands they have a new permanent member of the crew. First round of drinks is on you by tradition. That evening, Ethan rode into Custer despite it not being Sunday. He needed to tell Natalie and Samuel about his new permanent position. He found them at the store, which was just closing for the day. Samuel was locking the front door while Natalie counted the day's receipts at the counter. "Ethan," Natalie said, looking up with a smile, "we were not expecting you today." "I know, but I had news I wanted to share," Ethan said. "Douglas Webb offered me a permanent position today, $40 a month working with the training horses." "That is wonderful," Natalie exclaimed, coming around the counter. For a moment, Ethan thought she might embrace him, but she stopped short, conscious of propriety. "I am so happy for you." "Congratulations, son," Samuel said, extending his hand. "Douglas told me he was considering it." "That is a good position with a solid wage. You are building something real now." "That is the idea, sir," Ethan said. "I wanted you both to know because it changes things. I am not just a drifter anymore. I have steady work and a place to live. I can start planning for the future." Samuel studied him for a long moment. "And what future are you planning for exactly?" Ethan met his gaze steadily. "The kind that includes your daughter, sir, if she will have me. Not immediately," he added quickly. "I know we need more time to really know each other. But that is where I am hoping this is heading. I wanted you to know my intentions are serious and long-term." "I appreciate your honesty," Samuel said. "And I am not opposed to the idea, provided Natalie feels the same way. This is her decision as much as mine." Both men turned to look at Natalie, who was blushing furiously. "I am standing right here," she said. "You do not need to talk about me like I am not present." But she was smiling as she said it. She turned to Ethan. "I think your intentions are very clear, and I appreciate your straightforwardness. I am not ready to make any permanent commitments yet, but I am also not opposed to the direction things are heading." "Is that answer enough for now?" "It is more than enough," Ethan said, feeling like his heart might burst. "I am a patient man. I can wait as long as you need." Over the following months, Ethan proved those words true. He worked hard at the Webb Ranch, building a reputation as one of the best horse trainers in the territory. Douglas Webb gave him increasing responsibility, and other ranchers started bringing problem horses to the Webb Ranch specifically to work with Ethan. His savings grew steadily, the money from the race supplemented by his monthly wages and occasional bonuses, when he achieved particularly good results with a difficult animal. But more importantly, his relationship with Natalie deepened and matured. They spent every Sunday together, and Ethan began visiting during the week as well, helping Natalie with heavy work around the house and store. He fixed a loose step on the front porch, repaired the shutters that had been damaged in a storm, and built new shelves for the storeroom. Samuel watched these efforts with approval, seeing in them the actions of a man who was already treating Natalie as his responsibility. Natalie, for her part, revealed more of herself as the months passed. She showed Ethan her careful ledgers, explaining the intricacies of her father's business dealings. She talked about her dreams of someday opening her own shop, about the designs she sketched in the margins of her account books. She shared memories of her mother, both painful and sweet, and Ethan shared his own memories of his parents in return. They talked about everything: religion and politics, hopes and fears, the changing world around them. The Dakota Territory was evolving rapidly, with the railroad bringing more settlers and more change. Both Ethan and Natalie wondered what kind of future they were building toward, whether the wild openness of the West would survive or be tamed into something more civilized and constrained. "Part of me mourns what is being lost," Natalie said one autumn afternoon as they sat on her front porch, watching the leaves turn gold on the cottonwoods. "The wildness, the sense of possibility. But another part of me is glad for the stability that is coming. Schools and churches and laws. The ability to build something that will last. We can have both, Ethan said. We can preserve the best parts of what the West has been while building something better for the future. That is what I am trying to do with the horses. Keeping the wild spirit of the Mustangs but training them to work with humans instead of against them. You have a gift for that, Natalie said. Carson told me his father says you are the best horse trainer they have ever had. He wants to make you a partner in the ranch's breeding operation. He mentioned something about that, Ethan admitted. He is offering me a percentage of the profits from horses I train if I stay on for another 2 years. It is a generous offer. Are you going to take it? Natalie asked. I am considering it, Ethan said carefully. It would mean committing to staying at the Webb Ranch for at least 2 more years. That is a long time. Is it? Natalie asked, turning to face him. 2 years does not seem that long to me, not if you are building towards something. Ethan looked at her, trying to read the meaning behind her words. They had been courting for 6 months now, and he felt like he knew her better than he had ever known anyone. He knew that she took her tea with honey, that she sang quietly to herself when she worked on the accounts, that she had a fierce protective streak when it came to people she cared about. He knew that she was intelligent and capable and strong, and that he loved her more than he had ever thought possible. Natalie, he said slowly, if I commit to staying at the Webb Ranch for 2 more years, I need to know what I am committing to. I need to know if there is a future for us beyond courtship, because that is what I want. I want to marry you, to build a life with you, to have a family with you someday, but I need to know if you want the same things. Natalie was quiet for a long moment, her green eyes searching his face. I do want those things, she said finally. With you. But I am afraid, Ethan. My mother died young. My father has been alone for 6 years. What if something happens to one of us? What if we build something beautiful and then it all falls apart? Then we will have had something beautiful, Ethan said gently. He reached out and took her hand, feeling the calluses from her work, the strength in her fingers. Life does not come with guarantees, Natalie. All we can do is choose to love each other and work to make that love last. I am willing to take that risk. Are you? Natalie's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I am willing. Ethan felt like the entire world had just shifted beneath him. Are you saying what I think you are saying? I am saying that if you ask my father for permission to marry me, I will say yes, Natalie said, her voice growing stronger. I am saying that I love you, Ethan Sawyer, and I want to spend my life with you. I love you too, Ethan said, and then he was pulling her close, holding her carefully, aware that Samuel could look out the window at any moment. I have loved you since the moment I saw you. Everything I have done, every choice I have made since I came to Custer has been because of you. They sat together on the porch as the afternoon faded into evening, making plans and dreaming about the future. When Samuel came out to tell Ethan it was time to head back to the ranch, he found them sitting close together, Natalie's hand in Ethan's, both of them glowing with happiness. I take it something has changed, Samuel observed dryly. Yes, sir, Ethan said, standing. I would like to speak with you privately if I may. Samuel looked at his daughter, who nodded encouragingly. All right, come into my study. Ethan followed Samuel inside, his heart pounding. This was the second time he had put everything on the line for Natalie. The first time had been the race. This time felt even more important. Samuel settled into his chair behind the desk and gestured for Ethan to take a seat across from him. I assume you want to talk about my daughter. Yes, sir, Ethan said. I want to marry her. I am asking for your permission and your blessing. You have been courting her for 6 months, Samuel said. That is not very long. It is long enough to know what I want, Ethan said. long enough to know that I love her and want to spend the rest of my life making her happy, long enough to prove that I am serious about building a future here." "You have proven that," Samuel acknowledged. "You have steady work, you have saved money, you have been respectful of my daughter and my household. I cannot fault your behavior." He paused, studying Ethan with those sharp eyes. "But marriage is not just about behavior. It is about commitment through hard times as well as good. It is about being there when things get difficult. Can you promise me that?" "I can promise to try every single day," Ethan said. "I cannot promise perfection because I am not perfect, but I can promise that I will never stop working to be the man Natalie deserves. I will provide for her, protect her, and love her for as long as I live. You have my word on that, sir." Samuel was quiet for a long time. Then he stood and extended his hand. "You have my permission and my blessing. You won that blessing in a horse race, and you have kept it by proving yourself to be a man of your word. Marry my daughter, Ethan, make her happy, and if you ever fail her, you will answer to me." "I understand, sir," Ethan said, shaking Samuel's hand firmly. "Thank you, truly." They returned to the parlor where Natalie was waiting anxiously. When she saw her father's expression, she jumped up from her chair. "Well," she asked. "He has my blessing," Samuel said gruffly. "Though I told him that if he ever makes you cry, he will answer to me." Natalie laughed and embraced her father, then turned to Ethan with shining eyes. "I suppose this means we are engaged." "I suppose it does," Ethan said, grinning, "though I should probably get you a ring." "That can wait," Natalie said. "Right now I just want to enjoy this moment." They were married 3 months later, in December of 1883, in the same church where Ethan had sat beside Natalie every Sunday for more than half a year. The wedding was a simple but joyful affair, with most of the town in attendance. Carson Webb stood up as Ethan's best man, and Samuel walked Natalie down the aisle with tears in his eyes. Natalie wore a cream-colored dress she had sewn herself, with lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried wildflowers that were surprisingly hardy for the cold season, picked from the meadows near the Webb Ranch. Ethan wore new clothes for the occasion, purchased with some of his carefully saved money, and he felt both terrified and exhilarated as he watched his bride approach. When Natalie reached the altar and took his hands, Ethan looked into her green eyes and saw his entire future reflected there. The minister's words washed over him, traditional vows that had been spoken by countless couples before them. But in that moment, they felt entirely new and sacred. "I do," Ethan said when asked, his voice strong and clear. "I do," Natalie echoed, her smile radiant. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister intoned. "You may kiss your bride." Ethan cupped Natalie's face in his hands and kissed her gently, aware of the crowd watching but caring only about the woman in his arms. When they parted, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The reception was held at Samuel's house, with tables set up in the parlor and dining room laden with food that the townswomen had prepared. There was music and dancing, laughter and toasts. Douglas Webb congratulated Ethan and told him that his offer of partnership in the breeding operation still stood. Samuel pulled Ethan aside at one point and told him, gruffly, that he was proud to call him son. As the evening wore on, Ethan and Natalie slipped away to the house that Douglas Webb had offered them as part of Ethan's employment package. It was a small cabin on the ranch property, just 2 rooms and a loft, but it was theirs. Ethan had spent the last month fixing it up, repairing the roof and floor, building new furniture, making it into a home worthy of his bride. Natalie looked around the cabin with wonder, taking in the curtains Ethan had hung, the quilt on the bed that Samuel had commissioned from a local seamstress, the fire crackling in the hearth. "It is perfect," she said softly. "Absolutely perfect." "Not yet," Ethan said, pulling her close. "But it will be. We will make it perfect together." That first night as husband and wife was tender and sweet, both of them nervous and excited and deeply in love. They lay together afterward, Natalie's head on Ethan's chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the rise and fall of his breathing. "I am so happy," Natalie murmured. "I did not think I could be this happy." "Neither did I," Ethan admitted. "When I rode into Custer 9 months ago, I had nothing. Now I have everything that matters. A home, work I love, and you, especially you." "We are going to build such a good life together," Natalie said. "I can feel it." And they did. Over the following years, Ethan and Natalie built a life that was rich in the ways that mattered most. Ethan's partnership with Douglas Webb proved profitable, and his reputation as a horse trainer spread throughout the territory. Ranchers came from hundreds of miles away to have Ethan work with their horses, and the fees he commanded allowed him and Natalie to save steadily toward their dream of owning their own ranch someday. Natalie continued to keep her father's accounts, but she also began taking in bookkeeping for other businesses in Custer. Her meticulous attention to detail and her ability to spot discrepancies made her invaluable, and soon she had more work than she could handle. Together, she and Ethan were building a financial foundation that would have seemed impossible during their courting days. But more than financial success, they built a partnership based on mutual respect, trust, and deep affection. They talked about everything, made decisions together, supported each other's dreams and ambitions. When Ethan was frustrated with a particularly difficult horse, Natalie was there to listen and offer perspective. When Natalie was overwhelmed with work, Ethan helped her organize and prioritize. Their first child, a son they named James Samuel Sawyer, was born in September of 1885, 2 years after their marriage. Ethan held his son for the first time with shaking hands, overcome by the weight of responsibility and love. Samuel Langford, now a grandfather, doted on the boy, visiting several times a week to tell him stories and sneak him treats. A daughter, Elizabeth Mee Sawyer, followed 2 years later in 1887. She had Natalie's auburn hair and Ethan's brown eyes, and from the moment she could walk she followed her father everywhere, fascinated by the horses. Ethan would carry her on his shoulders as he worked, explaining what he was doing, and Elizabeth would listen with serious concentration. In 1889, 6 years after that fateful race, Ethan and Natalie finally achieved their dream. Douglas Webb was ready to semi-retire, and he offered to sell Ethan a portion of the ranch at a fair price, with generous terms. Combined with their savings and a loan from Samuel, Ethan and Natalie were able to purchase 300 acres of prime grazing land, complete with barns, corrals, and a modest house. The Sawyer Ranch was born, and Ethan threw himself into making it succeed. He continued training horses, but now he was also breeding them, carefully selecting bloodlines to produce animals that combined the stamina of Mustangs with the trainability of domestic horses. Natalie managed the business side, keeping meticulous records, negotiating sales, and ensuring they stayed profitable even in lean years. Carson Webb remained a close friend and neighbor, often riding over to consult with Ethan about training techniques or to simply share a meal. Samuel Langford was a constant presence in their lives, watching his grandchildren grow and taking pride in the success his daughter and son-in-law had built together. Life was not without challenges. There were harsh winters that tested their resources, droughts that dried up water sources, and the occasional problem horse that proved too dangerous or damaged to rehabilitate. Natalie had a miscarriage in 1890 that left both of them grieving, and there were times when money was tight and the future uncertain. But through it all, Ethan and Natalie held fast to each other and to the life they had built. They weathered each storm together, drawing strength from their partnership and their love. The cabin that had seemed so perfect on their wedding night eventually proved too small for their growing family. And in 1891, they built a larger house, a proper ranch house with multiple bedrooms and a wraparound porch that reminded Ethan of the Langford house where he had first courted Natalie. Their third child, a son named Douglas Webb Sawyer in honor of the man who had given Ethan his start, was born in that new house in 1892. Samuel Langford lived to meet this third grandchild, holding the baby with tears of joy in his eyes. He passed away peacefully in his sleep 3 months later, leaving his businesses to Natalie and his blessing on the family she had built. Ethan stood at Samuel's graveside, holding Natalie close as she wept for her father. He thought about that day 9 years earlier when he had ridden into Custer with nothing but a horse and a hope. Samuel had challenged him, tested him, and ultimately given him the greatest gift possible, the chance to prove himself worthy of Natalie's love. "He was proud of you," Ethan told Natalie as they walked away from the cemetery. "He told me so many times. He said you had built exactly the kind of life he hoped for you." "Because I had you to build it with," Natalie said, leaning into his embrace. "Father saw something in you that day you made your wager. He saw a man who was willing to risk everything for what he believed in. He respected that." "I am glad I took that risk," Ethan said. "Every single day I am glad." Years continued to pass, bringing more changes and challenges. The Sawyer Ranch grew and prospered, becoming one of the most respected horse breeding operations in South Dakota. Ethan's reputation spread, and he began writing articles for agricultural journals about his training methods, sharing what he had learned over decades of working with horses. James grew into a serious, responsible young man who took to ranch work naturally. He had his father's way with horses and his mother's head for business, and Ethan knew the ranch would be in good hands when he eventually passed it on. Elizabeth remained horse-mad, riding almost before she could walk properly, and she began helping her father train the younger horses as soon as she was old enough. Douglas, the youngest, was more bookish, fascinated by the new technologies and ideas sweeping the nation as the 19th century drew to a close. Natalie's hair began to show threads of silver, and Ethan's dark hair turned gradually gray, but the love between them remained as strong as it had been on their wedding day. They would sit together on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun set over the Black Hills, holding hands and talking about their day. Sometimes they would reminisce about that first race, about the moment when everything had hinged on Wildfire's speed and Ethan's courage. Wildfire herself lived to the remarkable age of 28, spending her final years as a pampered pasture pet, beloved by the entire family. When she finally passed in 1901, Ethan buried her in a place of honor on the ranch, with a marker noting that she had been the horse who changed his life. He wept as he filled in the grave, remembering that hot July day when he had bet everything on her speed and his skill, when she had carried him to victory and to the future he now enjoyed. "She gave me everything," he told Natalie that night, holding her close. "Without her, I never would have won that race, never would have won your father's blessing, never would have built this life with you." "She was a special horse," Natalie agreed, but the race was won by more than just a fast horse. It was won by a man who believed in himself enough to risk everything. "The horse gave you the means, but you gave yourself the courage. That is what my father saw. That is what I fell in love with." In 1903, 20 years after that fateful race, Ethan and Natalie celebrated their 20th wedding anniversary with a party that brought friends and family from across the territory. James was courting a rancher's daughter from a neighboring property, and Ethan saw in his son's eyes the same mixture of hope and determination he remembered from his own courting days. Elizabeth, at 16, was already making a name for herself as a skilled horse trainer, working alongside her father and learning everything he could teach her. Douglas, at 11, was talking about going to college, about studying engineering or law, about being part of the new century that was dawning. As Ethan looked around at the gathered crowd, at the ranch he and Natalie had built, at the family they had raised and the life they had created, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. He thought about the young cowboy he had been, riding into Custer with nothing but a fast horse and desperate hope. He thought about the race, about the way his entire future had hung on those 6 miles of Dakota dirt road. He thought about Samuel Langford's challenge and blessing, about Natalie's courage in believing in him when he was still proving himself. But most of all, he thought about the choice he had made to bet everything on himself, to reach for something difficult and precious and worth the risk. That single decision had shaped everything that followed. Every good thing in his life could be traced back to that moment, when he had pushed Wildfire toward the starting line and committed to winning or losing it all. "What are you thinking about?" Natalie asked, coming to stand beside him on the porch as the party continued inside. "About how lucky I am," Ethan said, putting his arm around her waist. "About how one race changed everything." "It was not just the race," Natalie said. "It was you. Your courage, your determination, your willingness to work hard for what you wanted. The race was just the beginning." "Maybe," Ethan conceded, "but it was an important beginning. It taught me that sometimes you have to risk everything to gain everything. That the biggest rewards come from the biggest leaps of faith." "Would you do it again?" Natalie asked. "If you could go back, knowing nothing about how it would turn out, would you still make that bet?" Ethan looked at his wife, at the gray in her auburn hair and the laugh lines around her green eyes, at the strength and wisdom that 2 decades of partnership had etched into her features. He thought about his children inside, about the ranch around them, about the life they had built together through joy and sorrow, triumph and struggle. "In a heartbeat," he said. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat, because it led me to you and you are worth any risk." Natalie smiled and kissed him, and they stood together as the stars came out over the Black Hills. 2 people who had built something lasting out of a single moment of courage and a willingness to bet everything on love. Their story became legend in Custer and beyond. The tale of the cowboy who won a race and a bride in the same wager, who turned a moment of desperation into a lifetime of happiness. Parents would tell it to their children as an example of courage and determination. Young men courting would invoke Ethan's name when asking fathers for their daughters' hands, hoping that some of his luck would rub off on them. But for Ethan and Natalie, it was not a legend. It was simply their life, the foundation they had built everything else upon. And as the years continued to pass, as they grew old together and watched their children grow and have children of their own, they never forgot that it all started with a single race, a fast horse, and a man willing to bet everything on love. When Ethan finally passed in 1925, at the age of 66, he died peacefully in his sleep with Natalie holding his hand. She followed him 2 years later, and they were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren gathered to remember them, to tell the story of the race and the wager, to honor the legacy of love and courage they had left behind. The Sawyer Ranch continued for generations, each new keeper of the land remembering the story of how it all began. And sometimes, on quiet summer evenings, family members would swear they could hear the thunder of hooves on the wind, the ghost of a chestnut mare racing toward a finish line, carrying a young cowboy toward his destiny. Whether it was real or simply the power of a story well told, it served as a reminder that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is bet everything on themselves and on love, and trust that the race will work out in their favor. For Ethan and Natalie Sawyer, that bet had paid off beyond their wildest dreams, giving them not just a single day of glory but a lifetime of love, partnership, and joy. And in the end, that was the greatest prize of all.